All right. Hello, hello. Welcome, welcome, everybody. Okay. Hopefully you are here for A&P 2, new year, new room for us. So that's maybe exciting, maybe not. We'll see how it goes. Already got one thing. I gotta go steal somebody else's eraser. At least I approve of that message on the side. Stay focused, stay alive, determine your future. Good messages. Don't know what the middle's about here. Yep. So we're going to get rolling today, and we'll start by going through the Brightspace course. But if you were in the corresponding section of A&P 1 last semester, everything's the same. It's just a new set of topics. If you are moving from some other class, that's okay. Dr. Schlater and I try to keep things roughly the same, but we'll walk through this stuff anyway. Okay, so here on our landing page, you can see our announcements. I've got all the upcoming quizzes and assignments added to your calendar. You see that on the side here. To find other information, you're going to go to content. You can find our syllabus, linked in syllabus. Yeah. So we can read that in a second, but I'm just going to walk you through how we're looking at stuff. You can also find the course schedule here. Under our course resources, we've got a general overview of what you'll be doing in the class. So you're going to be coming to class, you're going to be studying, you're going to be reading, and you're going to be taking a weekly little lecture quiz / homework assignment. I posted your lab schedule in here as well. Labs don't start this week, they'll start next week. But I'm not sure whether that course is open yet or not. So if you're curious about those dates, you can find them here. Okay. You can also find a link to where videos will be stored. Our course Zoom, if you have to attend online for a day or two, as well as a link to my drop-in hours, office hours, if you want to book a time to come to my office and let me know you're coming. We can chat about all kinds of stuff, course content, things that you're missing, things that are upcoming. My office is pretty much right across the hall. If you go out here, I'm over a little bit that way. Right. So cruising through, starting unit 1. Today will really just be an introduction and getting a feel for what we'll be covering in this semester. But we've got our link to our slides and study guides. We've got our different assignments and quizzes linked in here. And at the end of the month, a practice exam will show up. Yeah, change the date on that one. Change the starting date, but not the list. That'll be opening up later because we got to see how our pace goes a little bit this first month of class. Okay. So. Any questions yet? Or any problems yet? Awesome. I love starting a new year with no new problems. The joy. Okay, so this semester, we're going to be looking at some new organ systems, basically. So we're going to start by picking off sort of where we left off. So at the end of A&P 1, we'd been talking about the heart and heart function. So now in this first unit, we're going to think about the blood vessels coming out of the heart and the whole network of blood vessels throughout your body. So we'll be looking at both how those blood vessels work, as well as how the blood within those blood vessels works to transport gases around your body. So from there, we'll move into the respiratory system. So your lungs, continuing with that idea of moving gases, so oxygen and carbon dioxide around the body. Then we'll move into the urinary system, the renal system. So we'll be talking about kidneys. And we'll think about the cool things that kidneys do. Primarily, this is going to be really regulating blood pressure as well as helping you excrete all sorts of toxins from your body. Then we'll think about the GI system. So we're going to think about eating, and we'll end the class thinking about the reproductive system. Okay. So if you're here, you got this first part down. So our lecture is here in room 2122. So in this big lecture hall. As we did last year, I'll have lecture videos available. You can join us real time over Zoom, or you can find those immediately archived on YouTube because we'll be live streaming for that. So you should be attending class in person. It's better if you're here and can talk to your neighbors. And I find often really helps people focus, helps me focus if you're present. But if you need to attend on Zoom occasionally for whatever reason, that's great. You don't need to tell me about it unless it's becoming kind of a long absence, or I notice that it starts to have an effect on how you're doing in the class. And in that case, we got to touch base and figure out how to fix things. Okay. So we'll do lecture at the end of the week. You'll have a weekly quiz due Monday before class. Okay. Also during the week, you'll have SI sessions. So like last semester, there'll be extra credit, a point per week tied to attendance at SI. Just trying to get you studying as early as possible, right? This is all about putting some kind of key points in our calendars so that we have some motivation to keep going with this class instead of freaking out the weekend before an exam. So those won't start today, but they will start on Wednesday this week. Your SI leaders are the same as last semester, so I put their contact info for Carter and Katie up here. If you find as we go through that you'd like to meet with additional people to talk about course content, and you can always visit me in office hours, but you can also book tutoring through the Saints Learning Commons. Our tutors for A&P are great. Okay. So general reminder, what we're doing is we're preparing for class, and then as we're studying before class, you're taking a look through the slides. So you're pre-reading them. You don't have to memorize them, but you want to have an idea of what you should expect to see in class. There's a lot of kind of jargon in anatomy and physiology, or at least let's not say jargon, I guess, new terms, right? So you don't want this to all feel completely foreign when you get to class. So you'll be looking at those figures, linking them up to the textbook and getting a brief kind of skim through. Okay. So for this semester, I've also added to your slides periodically, like at the beginning of the slide deck, that kind of like key chunks throughout sections of the textbook that I recommend you kind of look through before we get to that section of slides in class. So again, trying to keep pace a little bit there. So then we'll come talk about this stuff in lecture, dive into them. I don't know if it's more detail or less detail, right? But dive into them in a different way. And we've got times and opportunities for questions. We got our quizzes and we got our studying techniques. Okay. So I showed you that lab schedule. Hopefully everybody is already registered for a lab, but I do want to make sure that everybody checks that they're registered for a lab. And the second piece is because there is a session of A&P 1 going on in the spring as well, make sure you signed up for an A&P 2 lab. So those are the Tuesday, Thursday ones, so probably you got it right, but double check. I think the A&P 1 lab is running on Wednesdays. Okay. So that'll run alternating weeks, moving across the hallway between the anatomy lab and the physiology lab. Okay. A personal piece of advice, I think you're going to get a physiology lab calendar specifically when you're in the phys lab. I've noticed that tends to kind of like slip people's mind to look at. It does have some important kind of like dates and deadlines on there that you should be aware of, that I know have some years kind of caught people off guard if they weren't paying attention to that calendar. So I recommend when you get to your first phys lab, make sure you pay attention to that. Okay. Finally, our materials for this class are the same as last semester. So we're just continuing with the same human physiology textbook. You're going to have an atlas for reference for the anatomy lab. And we are also going to be using the Respondus Lockdown browser again for our exams. If you need to download that, we got the link here. And you also have a kind of tester quiz in Brightspace to make sure it's working, make sure there aren't any updates that are necessary. You'll get a couple points for completing that by the beginning of next week. Okay. So speaking of things that you will be doing this week and early next week, okay, so we're meeting Monday, Wednesday, Friday this week. Since we are starting off running with our vasculature, and that really requires understanding how the heart works, got a chapter 13, so heart review assignment up for you. This is for extra credit if you complete it by Friday. Highly recommend that you do. Been a long time since the end of A&P 1. A long time and a short time, but it's always good to jog our memories. On Monday, we have no class. It's Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So you're going to be completing that lockdown browser update test by Wednesday. And that's when your first weekly quiz will be due as well. So I don't see a point making your quiz due a day that we don't have class. Okay. It'll be on Mondays usually, but since Wednesday is the first day of the week for us next week, that's when it's due. Okay. Any questions on that stuff so far? Cool. Okay. So we're not going to dive into textbook stuff immediately. It is the first day of class. But I do want to start out with, I think it's kind of fun. We're going to look at a patient video talking about their experience with something called neurogenic orthostatic hypotension. And the reason we're doing this is that this disorder is going to show us kind of like a lot of connections between some of the unit or some of the organ systems that we're about to talk about, as well as linking back to some of the organ systems we talked about in the fall. Okay, so we're going to watch this video, and as we're watching it, I want you to be kind of thinking about that, right? I want you to think about what are some concepts from A&P 1 that help you kind of put this disease in context, things that you kind of know already might be related to this. And I want you to be picking out some things that seem surprising or weird, or something you might need to understand a little bit better in order to fully figure out and understand what's going on with this patient, okay? There'll be a treatment list, and I screenshotted it for us later. We're going to spend a little bit of time kind of looking at that, and I'm going to ask you to, after the video is over, talk to your neighbors a little bit, making some sense, potentially a couple guesses about why those treatments relate to this condition. This will kind of like prompt us, give us some kind of mental candy before we dive into textbook stuff on Wednesday. Hopefully mental candy. I like watching patient videos.
I was trying to finding my way down the stairs one evening or one night, and I just suddenly felt myself just sort of falling off the stairs and down to the bottom level of the house.
Today on Behind the Mystery, we're talking to Keith, his wife Linda, and how they're living with neurogenic orthostatic hypotension, or NOH. Never heard of it? Well, let's start with the basics. N, neurogenic, associated with the nervous system. O, orthostatic, related to standing up. H, hypotension, abnormally low blood pressure. In the studio this morning to help us understand this condition is neurologist Dr. Stuart Isaacson. Good morning, doctor.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for being here. We're going to hear from Keith and his wife Linda in just a bit, but first let's talk about what is NOH. I've never heard of it.
Well, NOH, as you just pointed out, is neurogenic orthostatic hypotension. And it's a condition that's not very common, but occurs in people who have Parkinson's disease and some related conditions called multiple system atrophy. And the problem with NOH is usually when we stand up, we release a chemical called norepinephrine. And this causes the blood vessels to constrict and the heart to beat faster. So blood pressure comes up and we don't feel like the blood pressure is dropping. We don't have feelings of lightheadedness or dizziness. Many people with Parkinson's disease, probably about 1 in 5 have symptoms from NOH. And when they stand up, not enough norepinephrine is released and the blood pressure goes down and down. And they begin to develop lightheadedness and dizziness, and they might even pass out.
So in terms of how many people are affected, it's 1 in 5.
1 in 5 will have symptoms, and these may be provoked by dehydration or not feeling well or taking medication that may lower blood pressure. And then when symptoms come out, we have to pay attention to the symptoms. And one way we do this is we have people check their blood pressure. They can check it in the visit when they come to our office. They can check it at home. Often after breakfast might be a time of day when it's the lowest. They can keep a diary of how it changes around mealtime or after meals or when they're lying in bed at night. And when we find the blood pressure drops, we always look for a key point, which is at the heart rate. Usually when blood pressure falls and someone feels lightheaded, the heart rate goes up and up and up. But in neurogenic orthostatic hypotension, in NOH, the heart rate doesn't change much at all. And that's really a key for a doctor or nurse to make the diagnosis of NOH.
We recently spent the day with Keith, who has Parkinson's, and his wife, Linda. His diagnosis of NOH came several years into the onset of Parkinson's. Let's hear more.
I think he had a little trouble.
Do you want some more coffee?
Sure.
A little bit of fruit?
Yeah.
Okay. Coffee.
It was 10 years after his Parkinson's diagnosis that Keith and his wife, Linda, noticed signs and symptoms of what would eventually be diagnosed as NOH. Episodes were sporadic.
Kind of stumbling as after being in a car ride or going up a set of steps. Why all of a sudden would you be dizzy?
That was the time when we thought it was just a periodic event that was happening every now and then.
The NOH diagnosis was a little bit more difficult because initially I just thought it was the other shoe that fell off with Parkinson's. Keith had a couple falls, not just down the steps, but a couple general falls like, okay, does this mean this is what happens with Parkinson's? And we'd been educated enough to know that everybody is different. So we were also very fortunate that our general practitioner and our movement specialist spoke to each other. So between the two of them came up with, okay, we've got some blood pressure issues here.
Keith, a former pilot and self-described gym rat, has learned to manage his NOH symptoms. He makes sure to drink more water along with other lifestyle changes as recommended by his doctor.
The enemy is impatience. That sometimes you're in a situation where you don't know how severe your episode is going to be, and so I now have a routine where I get up and I will give the blood a chance to and the blood pressure to equalize, and I've been able to avoid any mishaps. We're just following a simple set of rules.
They keep a blood pressure log and communicate regularly with their healthcare team.
Communication with your doctor is extremely important.
College sweethearts, the Halls have always been an on-the-go family. They're taking steps to help ensure they continue to stay active, even with Keith's Parkinson's and NOH.
When Keith's first initial diagnosis, to me, it wasn't devastating. I'm always taken aback when people say that. So to us, it was just part of what our journey was going to be. It might be tiring, but I think to have things move smoothly, and you do have to think about everything. So if you are traveling or you're going out, you make sure that you have your snacks and your water and your glasses, and it's just part of who we are and what we're doing.
And they're committed to spreading awareness.
I think the best thing is to look into what your local resources are. Support groups can be wonderful, but they also cannot be for everyone. Finding classes that you can either do together or finding your own thing that you can do.
Now, doctor, while you're not Keith's physician, can you relate this to how your experience has been with your patients?
Well, I think what we heard from Keith and his wife are that these symptoms come on very gradually. It's hard to sometimes recognize that they're new symptoms. He's had symptoms of Parkinson's for several years where he's had trouble maybe arising from a chair and walking and having good balance and movement. And now different symptoms may occur that can be confused with the mobility problems of Parkinson's. So it's important when you have any types of symptoms standing or after a meal to bring those up at a visit with the doctor and nurse and talk about how the symptoms may be different and may be early symptoms of NOH.
Now, doctor, once properly diagnosed, are there ways to manage NOH symptoms?
When they stand up, they should do it gradually. Sit at the side of the bed for a couple of minutes, then stand up, and before they walk, wait a couple of minutes. Sometimes squeezing the calf muscles or the gluteal muscles can help maintain blood pressure when they stand up as well. Some of our patients wear compression stockings, usually up to the waist, so it can really push the blood back from the stomach and also the legs. We tell our patients to remain well hydrated, to really concentrate on drinking a lot of water and other fluids and adding salt to their diet, especially drinking those fluids in the morning hours when blood pressure is lower. Some of our patients elevate the head of the bed when they sleep. And when they don't work, we have medications that can help as well. Our patients always have to talk with their doctors and nurses to make sure that whatever they're anticipating to do to try to treat this problem is done with medical guidance.
It's manageable, and that you can modify the response that you have to the NOH by being patient. You can live with it, and you can do well with it.
So, doctor, to summarize everything, what are the key things we need to remember here?
Well, I think it's important to realize that NOH is very common in Parkinson's disease. It's even more common in multiple system atrophy. And so whenever you have symptoms that occur when you stand up, always think that it could be a symptom of NOH and bring it up at the next visit with your doctor and nurse. And to make the diagnosis, the blood pressure has to be checked seated and also standing with the heart rate and make that diagnosis. Because the diagnosis has to be made so we can use effective management to try to improve the symptoms and not have people doing less and less activity, becoming isolated, becoming depressed, not going out and going about their day because the blood pressure is too low.
Doctor, thank you so much for your time and all the information you've given us today.
Okay, thank you.
And if you'd like more information on NOH, you can go to this website, nohmatters.com, or just check out our website, thebalancingact.com.
Okay, so a quick PSA before we start discussing. I know that doctor there was saying you should always be worried if you have symptoms when you stand up, but you all probably should not be worried. So it is relatively normal that if you stand up, you might occasionally have a little bit of blurriness or fogginess. Orthostatic hypotension in and of itself is pretty common. This is a separate cause for it. So that first word, neurogenic, is the part that relates it to the Parkinson's. So don't freak out and think you have Parkinson's because you sometimes get dizzy when you stand up. So that's my PSA. When I was in graduate school, I got told about something called like first year medical student syndrome, where every time you learn about a disease in class, you immediately think you have it. This definitely happened to me. So don't do that. At least be aware that that's a thing. So yeah. So we're going to start by talking to our neighbors a little bit. So I want you to discuss, all right, a reminder, what are some things that were like familiar, some words they said, some concepts that might be related to this from A&P 1. And I'm going to have you guess a little bit about what are some of the additional topics that we're about to talk about that are also going to relate to this. And here is the list or a screenshot of the list of treatments for you. And go ahead and try and see if you and your neighbor can pick one or two and think about how that might relate to this condition, how it might improve it. Okay, so we'll take, let's do like 5 minutes to discuss with our neighbors about this. All right, awesome. I heard a lot of discussion. That's great. Let's circle back in. Okay, so breaking it down, let's start with the old stuff. Does anybody want to volunteer something that they said in this video that you sort of recognized or that seems related to some of the concepts we covered in A&P 1? Yeah. Yeah, norepinephrine. Perfect. So norepinephrine, and effect on heart rate. So that's linking together our understanding of the nervous system, the peripheral nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic parts of the nervous system, and our understanding of the heart, how it reacts to the nervous system and how that affects the heart's function and how it affects cardiac output. Perfect. Anybody notice anything else? Yeah. Oh yeah, we got our feedback loops. So we got some negative feedback loops in there, right? So as we start to think about blood pressure, right, we're going to be thinking about feedback loops, especially as we start to think about reflexes and how we have some reflexes that adjust our blood pressure. Anything else? Okay, cool. I don't have anything else on my little post-it. So next, new stuff. Anybody else? Can anybody guess stuff that's coming that is going to relate to this? So some new topics we think in our new sets of organ systems might help us understand this condition. Cool. Yeah. So pressure gradients, we're going to be talking about pressure a ton here in A&P2. We're going to be thinking about pressures as relates to our blood vessel, and therefore our blood pressure. So that's going to be a big part of this first unit. And pressure will come back in our second unit as well as we start to apply our understanding of pressure to the lungs. Anything else? What if I tell you that some of these symptom managements are actually also related to our renal system, to our kidneys? Can anybody pick out one of these that might be related to a kidney? Yeah. Yeah, the salt and fluid. Perfect. Yeah. So to fully understand blood pressure and how you end up with a stable blood pressure or an unstable blood pressure or one that's too high or one that's too low, we're going to have to go into Unit 3 and learn about the kidneys and how those are regulating your blood pressure in the long term. All right. So to close us out, we just went through one of these symptom management pieces. Does anybody want to volunteer a second favorite management technique and how you might guess it might be related to this condition? All right, I don't see any hands, so I'm going to just ask you all a question then. So we're going to be talking about something that can help us understand this waist-high compression stockings piece and a little bit of the lower body strength training. Does anybody have a guess about what kind of system we might be adjusting with those two pieces? No? Okay. Well, I'll tell you, this is going to have to do with our veins. So I will talk about this in our first unit as well as we think about the cardiovascular system and specifically the vasculature. We'll be talking about how our arteries and arterioles and capillaries relate to pressure, but we'll also be thinking about venous return to the heart and how that's important in stabilizing things. All right. So that is our intro, and we're going to wrap up a bit early for today. So this slide is also in your set of slides, but this is just my recommendation for what you take a look at before we meet on Wednesday. So you got that extra credit review of chapter 13, knock it out, start out over 100% in this class. It's amazing. Then you're going to skim through the first part of chapter 14, which is where we'll begin. All right. Have a great first week of classes, everybody.